Let me start with a question. When you hear the word feminism, what do you picture? For some people, it means fairness, equal opportunity, respect. For others, it means something very different. Man-hating, hostility towards masculinity, girl boss characters who never fail while the men around them look like idiots. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the actual idea of feminism can get lost. Because at its core, feminism was never supposed to be about hating men. It was about fairness. Let me say something up front. I consider myself a feminist. And I don't say that cautiously or reluctantly, I mean it. But being a feminist doesn't mean I hate men. It doesn't mean I dislike masculinity. And it definitely doesn't mean I stop enjoying stories about masculine characters. I grew up loving action movies. I love old Arnold Schwarzenegger films. I love characters like John Wick. When I'm watching those movies, I'm not sitting there thinking, oh look, another man doing man things. I'm just enjoying the story. And that's kind of the point. Enjoying masculine stories and believing in equality for women are not opposing ideas. They never were. Historically, the core argument of feminism was actually pretty simple. Women should not be treated as property. Women should have legal rights. Women should have the same opportunity to participate in society. That's it. And today, most reasonable people in modern Western societies don't really argue with those ideas. The basic principle that women deserve equal rights and fair treatment isn't very controversial anymore. But somewhere along the way, the cultural conversation started to shift. And feminism, masculinity, and representation in media all got tangled together. Part of the confusion comes from how these ideas show up in entertainment. Some men hear the word feminism and assume it means hostility towards them. Some activists talk about empowerment as if masculinity itself is the problem. And sometimes writers try to show strong women by making every man around them incompetent. That last one is probably the fastest way to lose half your audience, because people can feel when a story stops being a story and starts becoming a message. On a personal level, my father is actually a really good example of this. At this point, he refuses to watch many shows with female leads, not because he dislikes women, but because he assumes the show will follow a very specific formula. The women will be perfect, the men will be incompetent, and the story will feel less like something about a character and more like a lecture. So he just skips those shows entirely. And sometimes that means he misses things I know he will probably love. I have tried to get him to watch shows like Foundation or Silo, which have strong female leads, but also very strong storytelling. When audiences start expecting a lecture instead of a story, they stop giving stories a chance. And to be fair, culture has changed for good reasons too. If you go back and watch some of the old James Bond films, there are moments where Bond literally hits women. And the movie still treats him like a hero. Now, that's wrong now, and it was still wrong then, but the way audiences reacted to it at the time was very different. Today, if I saw that in a modern film, I wouldn't be thinking, what a great hero. I'd probably be thinking, cool, can the villain take him out now? So, culture evolves, and some of that evolution is actually a good thing. Another part of this conversation is masculinity itself. Historically, masculinity wasn't just about strength or dominance. It was also about responsibility, protection, even chivalry. If a man stood up for someone weaker than him, that was considered honorable. And honestly, I still think there's something good in that idea. I mean, obviously. Masculinity, when it's done well, isn't the enemy of feminism. Representation works best when it feels natural to the story. One of my favorite examples of this balance is the HBO series Rome. That show includes powerful female characters, but it doesn't rewrite the world to make them warriors or generals. Their influence comes through politics, family alliances, and social power, which is historically accurate. Women have always been a part of the story of civilization. They were never absent, but they often had different kinds of power, and Rome captures this balance beautifully. Another place where audiences get frustrated is when stories ignore basic reality in ways that break immersion. For example, Again, I love action movies, but if a 100-pound character takes down a 200-pound fighter with no explanation, it can feel a little silly, unless the story gives us a reason. Superhero movies solve that easily. Characters in films like Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel have superhuman abilities, so the audience accepts the difference. The story gives us a rule, and the audience follows it. Good storytelling solves problems like that. A show I'm currently watching is A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And one of the things I like about it is that it doesn't feel like it's trying to prove anything. It's just a good story. The main character is likable, he shows kindness, he stands up for someone who is weaker in that world. And the whole time I'm watching, I'm not thinking, oh wow, look at all these manly men. I was just watching the story unfold, which is usually what the audiences want. They don't want a lecture, they want characters they can believe in. The real point here is that feminism and masculinity were never supposed to be competing ideas. You can believe in equal opportunity for women and still appreciate masculine characters. You can want better representation in storytelling without turning every story into a cultural battlefield. And you can enjoy stories about men without feeling like those stories exclude women. These things are not mutually exclusive. So maybe the better question isn't whether a story is feminist or masculine. Maybe the better question is simply this: are we telling good stories about human beings? Because when stories focus on character, courage, flaws, and choices, audiences usually connect with them, no matter who the hero happens to be.